STO stands for stock transport order. The key word to note here is transport. And we'll see why. Now the business scenario is exactly the same. So there is a Chicago plant. There is a San Francisco plant. We want to move the goods from Chicago to San Francisco. Now to move the goods from Chicago to San Francisco, we would need some kind of a transportation means, right? Like a truck. Or we could use an external vendor like FedEx, which can do all the logistics for us. Let's say we use FedEx. Okay? Just for simplicity. The way to do a stock transport order is to create an STO in the receiving plant. The second step is to do a goods issue against the STO that has been created in the receiving plant. So you issue the goods, and step number 3 is goods receipt against the same STO. Just 3 steps. Now, what is the difference between these 3 steps and transfer posting that we have seen earlier? How different are they? Now, there are some preconditions that have to be met in order for us to be able to do a stock transport order this way. From a San Francisco perspective, we have to create Chicago as a vendor. Now, Chicago is supplying the goods to the San Francisco plant. So, Chicago becomes a vendor for San Francisco. If you do it in reverse, take the goods from San Francisco to Chicago, the San Francisco plant becomes a vendor. And that's the first setting that needs to be done. The second setting is to make sure that the material is extended between both the plants. Now we have already extended the material coffee beans to San Francisco in the previous chapter, so we have got that covered. Now let's see where you create the vendor as a plant. So go back, go to SPRO, IMG, Material Management, Purchasing, go to Purchase Order, set up Stock Transport Order. Now, there are a lot of settings here. We don't want to look at all the settings here because there is another way to do stock transport order using deliveries, but we are not going to go there. That's a cross-functional area. We require knowledge of both SD and MM. Since we are just learning MM, we don't want to really go there. So how do you do a stock transport order? Go to ME21N, just like how you create a purchase order. And instead of choosing NB standard PO, choose EUB. EUB stands for Stock Transport Order. And you see immediately the field vendor is now changed to supplying plant. And over here we say Chicago 1, hit enter. And you say coffee beans, quantity of say 75. And the plant that's asking for 75 pounds of coffee is San Francisco. So enter that there at the line item level. And it says contracts exist. We can hit OK. Doesn't matter. And click save. If you see this message and see no errors there, just click OK. And save it. Okay, there you go. The stock transport order 4500 is being created. Now, how different is this from a standard purchase order? Well, not much different, right? We've got a vendor, we entered materials, the price was automatically picked up, and all we had to do was change this field from NB to EUB. This field is called the document type, purchasing document type in this case. So this is part of configuration. We have not seen purchasing document type configuration yet. So we don't want to go too much into the details, but for now, just understand that this transaction, the blueprint for this transaction, when I mean blueprint in terms of how this document behaves, this purchasing order behaves or stock transport order behaves, is based primarily on this little drop down here. And we have changed the blueprint of this transaction ME21N from a purchase order to a stock transport order by changing the document type. And like I said, we don't understand the configuration behind the document type just yet. Don't worry about it. NB is standard PO and EUB is stock transport order. See, in case you don't see these codes NB and EUB, the way to enable them is by going to settings, options, and click on interactive design, visualization, and ensure that these two check boxes are checked on. Show keys with drop downs, sort keys with drop down lists. Once you have them enabled, just go back and come again and you should see these keys enabled, the EUB and NB. If not, you'll just see the description, stock transport order and standard PO, and sometimes it can be confusing. You see, the description for all these keys is the same. This is EC and this is ECDP, but the description is the same, electronic commerce. So in cases like that, it becomes difficult to select the right key from the drop down. In our case, we have chosen EUB for stock transport order, which has changed the blueprint of how we do this purchasing order. Now, if you go back and enter that purchase order number in there, it's not really much different. The vendor has changed from 4001 to supplying plant. Now, it's not the vendor who is delivering the goods, it's the supplying plant. It's a plant, it's one of our plants. And the way we have done it previously is using transfer posting. And what does a transfer posting have? It has the material, it has the movement type, it has the source plant, it has the target plant, and quantities. Well, we have all of that here, right? We have the material, we have the source plant, we have the target plant, which is San Francisco. It's just that the description is different, but it's San Francisco. And we have quantity, right? We have everything. What else is there? Well, we have a delivery schedule. This is one of the advantages of using a stock transport order. Using transfer posting, either one step or two step, you don't have a schedule of delivery. And we'll see what a schedule of delivery is when we start to compare a transfer posting with stock transport order. And we also have deliveries, we have texts, we have delivery addresses, confirmation. There is so much more functionality in a stock transport order when doing stock transfer versus doing it using transfer posting. Before we compare this, let's just finish this stock transport order. So step number 1 is done. Now let's do step number 2, which is issuing a goods against the stock transport order in the supplying plant. How do you do that? This is simple, using MyGo. So what do you want to do? You want to do a goods issue, okay, against a purchase order, and the purchase order number is this. I just pasted it from my clipboard and hit enter. Alright, the movement type is automatically determined. It's 351 from stock in transit, from plant to stock in transit. And the storage location from which we want to pick up the goods is coffee. And what's the quantity? 75. We're good with that. Click item OK and hit save. Alright, the material document is posted. Now let's go check the stock. So the stock over here in Chicago, coffee storage location, should go down by 75. Just like how we have done in transfer posting. Let's go refresh this. Did it go down? From 700, it went down by 75 pounds and came down to 625. But the San Francisco plant stock did not go up just yet. So we have done this goods issue which removed stock from the storage location using movement type 351, and of course it's a minus because it's removing the stock. And where is the stock now? The 75 pounds? Is it there in the stock transfer? No. Where is it? You see, it's an on order stock. So the way to check for in transit stock when you do it via stock transport order is not by going and checking it in MMBE. You cannot see the stock in transit in MMBE when you do this whole process of stock transfer via stock transport order. MMBE shows it as on order stock. So that means the San Francisco has ordered for 75, purchase order, like a purchase order, not from a vendor but from another plant, the Chicago plant. There is another transaction that you can use to purely look at the stock in transit from the perspective of stock transport order. So if you go to MB5T and select the material, and the receiving plant is San Francisco, right? And click execute, you should see the 75 right there, and the supplying plant is Chicago one. So why is this different from transfer posting? It's the way the accounting is done. So behind the scenes, transfer posting is more of a inventory management based solution to transferring stock. But stock transport order can involve logistics as well. It can involve accounting as well. It's much more involved. All right. So before we go talk about the differences, let's complete this transaction. Using 351, we have removed the stock from Chicago into transit of San Francisco. And now we want to receive the goods into the San Francisco plant based on that stock transport order. That's step number 3. So select goods receipt against a PO. All right. Hit enter. And it automatically determines the material quantity, where it's going to go, the movement type, etc., etc. And the storage location, of course, is coffee. Click item OK and save. Now the stock in transit should be gone. It's no longer stock in transit. See, you don't see anything there. And it should magically appear in the San Francisco plant. Do you see that? 150 plus 75 is 225. All right, so we have used 101 plus as the movement type to receive goods from that stock transport order. Now I am sure you must be wondering why do we have to do it one way versus the other? So let's compare a transfer posting versus an STO or a stock transport order. Why do you have to use one method versus the other? A transfer posting is typically used when the source and destination, it could be transfer posting between two different storage locations, like the coffee and raw material storage location, or you could use a transfer posting to do a stock transfer between two different plants, Chicago and San Francisco. Now, when the source and destination are close by, you typically tend to use a one-step transfer posting. If they are far away, then you have two options. Of course, the first option is to use a transfer posting, and you can also use a stock transport order. This is far away. This is nearby or far away. You can use transfer posting for either of these methods. But a stock transport order is typically used when the source and destination are far away. The second difference is transfer posting is used when you want to do a stock transfer between plant to plant or storage location to storage location. A stock transport order is typically used from plant to plant. It's not used when you want to do it from storage location to a storage location within the same plant. A transfer posting gives you two different ways to do the same thing. One is via one step, the second is via two step. A stock transport order by definition is two step. There's no one step stock transport order. A transfer posting cannot do external logistics. What do I mean by external logistics? Now, when you want to transfer the goods from Chicago to San Francisco, I said we're going to use FedEx. And FedEx, say for example, is going to use 2 days. Now the San Francisco plant is expecting this goods to be received in 2 days. Where do you specify those 2 days? Let's open that stock transport order. And you can see that you can specify a delivery schedule. Oh, I'm expecting this to take 2 days. If you have multiple schedules, you can specify that there. Like if there is a large quantity of goods to be transferred, you can do it in 2 trucks, 2 FedEx trucks. One is going to take 2 days, the second is going to take 3 days. Sure, you can specify that in the delivery schedule. You can also do over delivery and under delivery tolerances. And you can specify the delivery address. Where is it going to go? So this is all data related to logistics, and you cannot specify that in transfer posting. Why? Transfer posting is a very simple way to do stock transfers. It's a pure inventory management transaction. But a stock transport order, on the other hand, is almost like the receiving plant is placing an order with the sending plant. And you have all the facilities and advantages that you have when you do using a standard purchase order. So because we can put dates, addresses and stuff like that in a stock transport order, we can plan the receipts. So the receiving plant, San Francisco plant, can just run a report and say, what am I going to receive today? If it's a huge truck, he's got to line up the labor force so that they can receive it. If you're going to do that using transfer posting, the person in the receiving plant would not have any idea, because there is no question of putting date in a transfer posting. Right? There cannot be tolerances. And another advantage with using a stock transport order is traceability. Traceability. What do I mean by traceability? With the stock transport order, you have a history. What have we done here? We have done a goods issue in a particular plant, the sending plant, and we have done a goods receipt in the receiving plant. How much quantity has been received? Is there a shortfall or is there a surplus? All of that can be tracked. With transfer posting, you really can't track anything. There's no history, there's no traceability. You don't know who has done what. And let me explain another advantage of using stock transport order. Say, for example, this is America, right? And say this is San Francisco, and this is Chicago. And say we are getting our coffee from Africa. This is a good time to laugh at my drawings, okay? Now, from Africa, say the coffee comes in a ship all the way to San Francisco, and then from here, from a truck to Chicago. Now let's say, for example, because San Francisco is located on the coast, let's say, for example, the vendor is saying that he's going to take $1 per kilo in freight to deliver the plant to Chicago, to San Francisco. But if you want the vendor to deliver the goods to Chicago, he's going to take $2. 1 plus 1, say. Internally, it's not just coffee that moves from Chicago to San Francisco. We move muffins, we move pastry, we move so many different things. So we have our own truck. And because we have our own truck, we don't need this extra surcharge of moving coffee. San Francisco plant can procure all the coffee, and when I mean all the coffee requirements of Chicago and San Francisco put together. Say Chicago needs 50,000 pounds of coffee per month, and San Francisco needs 75,000 per month. The total requirement can be planned right out of San Francisco, 125,000. So the vendor is going to deliver 125,000 to San Francisco, and the freight is going to be cheaper because it's port to port. So, and the requirements from Chicago will be created as purchase requisitions, with the supplying plant as San Francisco, not the vendor in Africa. Can you do that using transfer posting? No, you cannot do that. You cannot plan anything using transfer postings. But with purchase requisitions, you can. Let's see how it works. So go to logistics, material management, purchasing, purchase requisition, create. So what's our material? Coffee. Say we need 1,000 pounds of coffee, and the item category over here is stock transfer as opposed to standard, and you need them in Chicago. And what's the supplying plant? Now, when you create a purchase requisition, it doesn't ask you for the supplying plant. It only asks you what is the plant that you need the goods for. But because you have changed the item category to stock transport or stock transfer, it's asking you, oh, it's not a purchase, it's a stock transfer between plants. So the supplying plant is San Francisco. And at what price? Say $10. Okay, save it. So here is our purchase requisition, which was created not as a standard purchase requisition but as a stock transfer purchase requisition. So which is this step here. So every day or every week the Chicago plant's planner will be creating these requirements. Oh, I need 100 pounds of coffee, I need 1000 pounds of coffee. So all the requirements are being tracked as purchase requisitions, and this purchase requisition will not be converted to a purchase order that goes out to a vendor 4001. Why? Because we know the Chicago plant does not have any relation with the vendor, say sitting in Africa, because we know it's going to be more expensive if the vendor directly supplies us. Instead, San Francisco plant is going to be the supplier of coffee. And that's why we have created this purchase requisition as a stock transport purchase requisition. How did we do that? We did that by changing the item category, and thereby the system asked us to specify the supplying plant. So we have entered the item category as U for stock transfer and supplying plant as San Francisco. That was just a requisition. That doesn't mean that San Francisco is going to provide the goods. For San Francisco to provide the goods, you have to create an order. How do you do that? Go click on purchase requisitions, and what's the purchase requisition number? And let me look at my purchase requisitions. This is my purchase requisition. You can just go here by looking at my purchase requisitions and then drag and drop it here. So that's the data from the purchase requisition for 1000 pounds of coffee, and it's in U, which means it's meant for a stock transport order. So in this case, we don't need a vendor, right? What do we need? We need a stock transport order. Now it doesn't ask you for a vendor, it automatically picks the supplying plant from the purchase requisition. And from this point onwards, all we have to do is do two things. Do a goods receipt, do a goods issue. Goods issue at the supplying plant, goods receipt in San Francisco, the receiving plant. Right? So linking the STO to requirements is something that you cannot do here, but you can do that here using the stock transport order. Now there are some more differences between using transfer posting versus stock transport order, but in order for us to understand it, we have to understand the concept of delivery, which is an SD, sales and distribution concept. Since that is cross-functional customization, I don't want to discuss creation of stock transport order using deliveries. Now, since this course is more about inventory management, we're not going to go too much into stock transport order, but instead start to focus more on some of the other things that we can do in inventory management.